destructive potentials, all the uses and other demands that may be placed upon their resources and labor services. It is sufficient, Hayek argued in a famous article called The Use of Knowledge in Society, that we communicate with each other in sort of a shorthand. And that shorthand is the global system of prices. Okay, the global system of prices. It is sufficient for you sitting here in the Bahamas to demonstrate a demand to buy things as reflected in the price you'd be willing to pay for it, for a sufficient minimum amount of information to be conveyed to people in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in Australia, who might be able to satisfy your particular demands and wants as reflected in your willingness to buy at the price that you're willing to pay. You're communicating with all the other suppliers of resources, raw materials, labor services, finished commodities, by your expression of your demand and its intensity, by the prices you're willing and able to pay in the stores here in the Bahamas. Likewise, the prices that you find in the stores are a reflection of all the information of other producers, suppliers, and resource purveyors around the world as to what they could supply to you, in what quantities they could supply, and the price at which they could afford to sell it to you. And that is the means by which we communicate. You know, in our Western tradition, by which I mean the Anglo-Saxon American tradition, which is the basis of your legal system as well as America's, there's this long tradition of freedom of speech, that the government, no political authority, should in any way limit, abridge, interfere with our ability to have freedom of conscience and freedom of thought to express ourselves to each other for the mutual gain of sharing knowledge and information and just opinions and ideas with each other, by which we all become richer through the conversational approach. No interferences with freedom of press, that you may have access to anyone's ideas anywhere in the world through the written form, and you to share your ideas with them if people are interested in what you have to say. It is the means by which we have cultural and intellectual communication with each other, through freedom of speech and freedom of the press. To my mind, the price system of the world should be covered under these ideals and principles and legal protections of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Why? Because through the prices that we're willing to pay and the prices at which others are willing to supply, we are communicating with each other. We're talking to each other. What is it that I want? What value do I place upon it? What could I supply? What, given all of the uses and alternatives that I could use my resources for, at what price could I be and would I be willing to supply it to you? Without a functioning price system, we cannot tell each other what our demands are or what our supply potentials could be. And therefore it would be as if here in this extended division of labor, enveloping the globe, in which we are dependent upon not just millions, but now billions of our fellow human beings for all of our wants and desires, material, spiritual, intellectual, cultural. If we could not express and communicate with each other in the price system, it would be as if every time we wanted to tell someone in the world what our demands or supply potentials were, it would be as if someone put their hand on our mouth and you couldn't talk. If we view prices as a communication mechanism like this, then we realize that it is important for people to be allowed to communicate this information with each other. Now, if we think about it this way, prices are an extremely delicate and careful indicator. It's like a dial on a machine that no matter how small the change that the dial is meant to register, every little change, no matter how small and minute, the dial moves a little bit to indicate that something that the dial is responsible of showing has been modified or changed from what it had been before. That's what prices do. No matter how small the shift, the modification of some factor on the demand side of the global economy or the supply sides of the global economy, every shift in people's demand to buy things, willingness to buy things, a change in their preferences, that they want more of this, less of that, is indicated in the little dials of demand prices. And every shift in someone's ability to supply their access to resources, their technological knowledge, the attractiveness and the demands of producing other things for other people in other places. It's indicated in the supply price dials that things are a little bit more expensive, a little bit less expensive. More difficult to buy, less difficult to buy. And through these shifts in the global system of prices, we're constantly tending to be coordinated with each other, interacting successfully with each other. It's what those economists, if you remember your supply and demand, that equilibrium price, that market clearing price, at which all those who want to buy at a particular price tend to be matched up with all those who are willing to supply at that price. And that assures the fact that when you go into the store, the goods are there. You go into the supermarket to buy your bread and your cheese and your milk and your meat and your vegetables and your fruit, and guess what? It's there. Without anyone planning it, without a dictator commanding everybody, miraculously it's there. Because each individual in his own corner of the local and global division of labor is following the price signals and applying themselves with their talents and abilities suggest they can earn the most, and responding to what we, others in the society, say we want, and the intensity of our demand as expressed in that little indicator dial of the prices of various things. And these shifts in prices reflecting changes in either supply and demand bring about the necessary adjustments, modifications that assure that there tends to be this pattern of supply and demand. Now, is knowledge perfect? Do errors occur? Of course, all the time. I don't have perfect knowledge. You know how I know I don't have perfect knowledge? My wife reminds me every day. You forgot to do this. Why didn't you remember to do that? I can assure you I have no perfect knowledge. Therefore, do I sometimes make mistakes? Again, ask my wife. Day in and day out. I'll say that. Hundreds of miles away. Yeah. Oh, it's being recorded. She'll find out. I'm in trouble now. Can we delete that little segment?
Definitely.
Anyway. And certainly, therefore, people make errors and mistakes in the marketplace too. All production is forward-looking. Every investment is thinking of years ahead. And the future can be different than today. And we all know that the future is different than today. So, businessmen, enterprises, entrepreneurs, they undertake production today. Hiring workers, purchasing resources, renting land, going to financial markets and borrowing money to invest in capital equipment. All to begin production processes that may take weeks or months or sometimes years to eventually sell to consumers further down the road at some point in the future. And therefore, entrepreneurial judgments are anticipatory, expectational, based upon imaginings of what they believe the market will be like in the future. And we can be successful in these estimates and expectations, and we can make errors or mistakes. It's inevitable that this is the case. Okay? But the fact is that the market is always tending to shift to see that resource ownership, production direction, is in the hands of those who demonstrate more than others a competency on management of enterprises and entrepreneurial decision-making. The successful entrepreneur makes what? Profits. And his profits gives him the greater financial means to expand his enterprise. It's as if the consumers, we, are going up to the entrepreneur and saying, good fellow, you did a good job. You made what we wanted at a price we were willing to pay, and you did it in an efficient way that you kept your costs down to earn yourself a profit. Use those profits to plow it back into your enterprise, to reinvest it, and do more of that good stuff that you're doing for me. This gentleman here, he's not as good an entrepreneur. He suffers losses. His costs are greater than his revenues. That's the what is the market doing? Shape up, fellow. You're not making what we want, the prices we're willing to pay. And that's demonstrated by the fact that what we're willing to pay you in your total revenues for the product you're offering is less than your cost. Shape up or get out. Okay? And if he can't figure out how to compensate for his mistakes and errors and misreadings of the mark.